Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Carolyn Webb. I work for Sustain Ontario to coordinate the Ontario Edible Education Network. It's a network that's supporting efforts to get children and youth eating, growing, cooking, celebrating, and learning about healthy, local, and sustainably produced food. And I also work for the Coalition for Healthy School Food that's advocating for a Canada in which every school-age child and youth has a healthy meal or snack at school each day. I'm joining you from Ottawa and gratefully acknowledge that I make my home on the unceded and traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. I'm thrilled to welcome our speakers and everyone watching today. Our conversations about how to continue the political momentum on recent food literacy and school food program successes. And the event is hosted in partnership between Sustain Ontario, the Ontario chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, and Brescia University College. So as a bit of background, in October 2020, a private member's bill, Bill 216, a Food Literacy for Students Act, was introduced in the Ontario legislature by Conservative MPP Daryl Cramp. And it proposed that courses of study be developed in experiential food literacy education and healthy eating for grades 1 through 12, and that students must have opportunities to grow food, prepare food, and learn about local foods. The bill was praised across parties and it quickly passed first and second reading. And while it was suspended in September 2021, we have high hopes that it will be reintroduced, and we're pleased to have already seen the introduction of a revised science and technology curriculum for grades 1 to 9 that include learning more about food, nutrition, and agriculture. And then at the federal level, in September 2021, the Liberal Party of Canada committed in its election platform to develop a national school food policy and work towards a national school nutritious meal program with a $1 billion investment over 5 years to help children learn and grow. And the NDP committed $1 billion over 4 years for school food. So in December 2021, developing a national school nutritious meal program was included in 2 federal mandate letters. So I'd like to thank everyone who has been a part of bringing these initiatives to reality. And I'm so appreciative to have our party representatives here today to share how they'd advance school food and food literacy if elected. Now I'll pass it over to my fabulous colleague, Peggy O'Neill, to start the discussion.
Thanks, Carolyn. And I just love to echo what you just mentioned, which is the wonderful team who's been working to make school food programming and food literacy in Ontario a reality, and all of the people that have worked tirelessly to make that happen. And it's a real pleasure to be here. It's springtime and the farmers are in the fields, and individuals and communities in some schools are in their gardens. And so new beginnings and lots to look forward to. And it's also lunchtime. And there's a lot of students eating right now as we speak and explore this topic. And some of them are participating in school food programs, and others are going to be a little bit hungry. So I know by the end of this meeting at 1 o'clock, I'll be hungry. So it's going to remind me of what we're doing here today. And so just before I invite our first speaker to share their commitments today, I just wanted to inform everyone of what our process was to arrive at this moment. I reached out to the party leader offices and sent an invitation to the 4 party leaders and invited each leader or a representative to join us today. And we shared 4 questions in advance so that everyone knew what it was that we wanted to talk about, but also in our media advisory and for people joining us on Facebook Live, they also knew. So I'd like to just go over what those questions are. I'm not going to restate them again every speaker, but I would like to share them with everyone on the screen, please. And we can cover what was the framework for today's dialogue. So we asked 4 questions. If elected, what will your party do to, number 1, advance food literacy as a mandatory part of the school curriculum for grades 1 to 12 in Ontario? Number 2, how will you strengthen the conditions for experiential, so hands-on food literacy education in Ontario schools? So 2 questions about food literacy in the Ontario curriculum, and then 2 questions about food programming. So the 3rd question is, first one on food programming, is how will you address Ontario's annual investment in the student nutrition program to accommodate rising food costs coupled with greater demand? Second question on food programming, and 4th of the set, how will you work with the federal government on a national universal healthy school food program? And that's to bridge the funding that Carolyn just mentioned. So thank you very much for that slide, Gustav. So those were the questions that we sent out, and we have some amazing representatives with us here today, and we're all very grateful to have you. So we had to decide on what was the order, and so we just decided we'll go alphabetically by party. So we'll do the Green Party of Ontario, then the Ontario Liberal Party, Ontario New Democratic Party, and then the Progressive Conservatives. So it's just alphabetical, and we hope that that order works for everyone here. So today we will have 15 minutes per candidate, and I will offer the first 10 minutes of the 15 to the speakers to share their thoughts and views on behalf of their party and leaders of the 4 questions that we just presented. And then I'll ask just for clarification if I need any, or highlight anything that I think that would be important to emphasize. And then these speakers will be able to correct me and be sure that I've really represented well what it is that you said. And then we'll move on to the next speaker. And to keep us all rolling and on time, we have Alicia Martins here from the University of Guelph, who is our timekeeper to make sure all of those little intervals of 15 minutes and 5 minutes, I don't talk past them. So, so that said, we're off and ready to go. And our first, as I had mentioned before, just because G comes before any of the other letters, is the Green Party of Ontario. And we want to thank Mr. Mike Schreiner for inviting on his behalf Mr. Matt Richter from Parry, Sound-Muskoka to join us. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Matt, and thank you so much for being here.
Peggy, thank you. And just to clarify, am I going through all 4 questions first, or are we taking turns? Okay, all right, gotcha. All right. and Carolyn, thank you for your opening remarks. Just for a quick recorded last name, it's Richter, not a biggie, but that's being, no, it's all good. All good, get it all the time. First off, to Carolyn and Peggy, Sustain Ontario, thank you so much for putting on this important, like tremendously important topic and focus within government. You know, over the past 4 elections that I've ran, started in 2007, often is the case that we get to the end of the election and people reflect on the ups and downs, the positives and negatives of the election, and it's there every time. Not this time, where people are disappointed that there wasn't enough attention devoted to farming, food literacy, the role of food literacy and education, and how that can have a tremendous impact on our students, and actually on all generations for that matter. So to start, I want to just recognize that this important topic is not just a food, it's not just an education issue, it's a healthcare issue, and it transcends all areas of government, naturally some more than others. And one commitment of the Green Party across all areas is to stop thinking of our issues in silos of government. We need not only cross-party support to get on with real action when it comes to food literacy, but we need cross levels of government and the ministry's support and recognition. And this is what we hear within, you know, from all experts across all areas of government, that this issue is just so important to get real meaningful action on. To that extent, I'm quite familiar in my personal life as a teacher with the need for doing more focus on food literacy, especially during the pandemic. Over the past 2 years, we saw the tremendous impact or lack thereof that food nutrition and food literacy played on students' health, as many students were left to fend for themselves during the day. And you know, but sometimes some had better avenues to getting the health that they need through their food, and others not as much. You know, when it comes to Bill 216 and knowing that it received cross-party support, that's a great first step. It's a wonderful first step. And it's something that I think had been advocated already in certain school boards, but to know it's across the province, that this provincially is going to be supported, really needs to now be supported with the appropriate funding. Unfortunately, as a teacher and as a parent myself, we see all these great initiatives in place, and put in place, but they're not followed through on because school boards and schools are strapped to actually implement the changes that are being so desperately required. And this can be an election that we can really focus on the future we want. And when it comes to food literacy, do we want to get real action with food literacy into our schools and get the experiential opportunities and the actual follow through within, or do we want to just have this as a checklist item? You know, and that's the harsh reality when we see a conservative Ford government that has consistently undermined these different projects. Even though they support Bill 216, they undermine it in terms of how funding gets allocated to school boards. It's choices. Do we want school boards worrying about the educational quality accountability office standardized test, where it's $30 million plus per year going to a test that students don't really need to do to tell teachers or to inform teachers what's necessary? Teachers already know. Consider that $30 million plus what that could be doing to help support nutrition programs, healthy breakfast programs, to support different experiential initiatives in different schools, like one great program here in my riding of Parry, Sound-Muskoka called Farmers in the Playground, you know, where actual farmers come to the playground, they set up gardens, even some with livestock. You know, believe it or not, we had in our local school, we had the school pig at VK Greer Public School in Port Sydney, Ontario. But it's about bringing in fostering those relationships with experts and local farmers, and appropriately funding it so that it's not just a one-off cycle or just happening once in you know a few years. That there's consistency, and that consistency goes from grade kindergarten right through to grade 12. So in terms of the food literacy being mandatory, that's great, but now it has to be followed through. Teachers, the Ontario Principals Council said the same thing. Great that our teachers are getting these opportunities to include things like food literacy in the science curriculum, and by default, the health curriculum as well. But they always wonder, well, how are teachers going to find time to incorporate this into their daily schedule? How are they going to actually get the experience as to know how to do this? It takes time, it takes resources, it takes training. So it's not just a funding issue, it's also a focus issue of priorities. Do we want our teachers focused on studying data to no end on literacy and numeracy test scores that skews to that level instead of actually focusing on other areas of our curriculum? Unfortunately, you talk to most teachers and administrators, and they're going to say, these are all wonderful initiatives, but we need a government that prioritizes it, and not just as a checklist item on an announcement. So our commitment is full, it's holistic, to not just funding, but ensuring that the commitment and priorities are there to get on with it. You know, when we talk about experiential food literacy, that comes to funding equipment too. We need to not just fund the outdoor equipment of getting gardens going, getting in-house urban greenhouses growing. We have vertical towers that are now being used in schools, so people can actually go into schools and start learning how to farm, but with urban methods. And those are wonderful initiatives. But again, having a living wall where you can go and pick lettuce and strawberries and green peppers off of a living wall, those are wonderful. Again, requires funding, and that funding needs to be sustainable from one election cycle to the next. And these areas are just so important, but then it also needs to be benefited with the actual equipment in school kitchens, and with making sure that volunteers and experts are coming in to do this, to incorporating within the kitchen even things such as blenders, so that they can take the spinach or the different vegetables that may have been grown and incorporate that with different ingredients and make smoothies that can taste good but be exceptionally healthy. So these are all the investments that we take into experiential learning. And I think it's so important that we realize that even though it's put into the science curriculum, that it's also known in the health curriculum, the math curriculum for financial literacy. We see time and time again that if people truly want to bring down their cost of living, when it comes to groceries, that they need access to quality local produce. This is the initiative. I saw on your map, on the Sustain Ontario map of Ontario, in that infographic, I saw all the different foods that made up in that neat graphic that you had. Those were all nutrient dense and just fantastic foods that we need to be celebrating and honoring into our programs. So we need to ensure too that if we're going to put healthy guidelines into our schools, that those are there. And we're the adults, we're the experts, we're the ones who can share with students that there's a time and a place for certain treats. And we want students to celebrate and honor the amazing foods that our local farms and farms across Ontario provide. Well, our farms don't grow chocolate bars. They don't grow what would be arguably junk food. So if the school in the province is going to say that certain junk food is banned from schools, well, they can't offer loopholes so that weekly we hear of schools still selling quote unquote junk food. We need to ensure that the experiential learning experiences actually take and foster the food that we're growing and show the transition to a valuable food product that students can flourish with through understanding, but also actually in their own health.
You have one minute left now.
Awesome. Clearly, I'll just jump quickly to the last one. Of course, we're going to work across federal government. So between OMAFRA and Agri-Food Canada, of course, that needs to be constantly being looked at. And when it comes to the school nutrition programs, we're fully in favor of endorsing healthy, nutritious lunches and breakfasts and fully funding. And also looking at and honoring existing relationships with grocery stores that already exist. So from that angle, we already see school boards that have already fostered relationships, and we need to build upon that and continue those healthy relationships there too. So lots to talk about, and on so many levels, really excited with a topic like this. Thanks for the time and for the patience with going through these different specific points, and looking forward to continuing the conversation after June 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. And I very much heard an integrated approach across government silos in terms of health, economics, education, and very much an integrated approach, not just to supporting the Bill 216, whatever the next generation of that is, but also really understanding the funding for that and a commitment for the funding and some possible sources on where might funding come, is you've stated a few times looking at the EQAO and the standardized testing as a possible source.
Yeah.
And that the Green Party of Ontario and the team would support working with the federal government on the transfer dollars for the healthy school food programming, but also you would support, the party would support the increased funding for the Ontario Nutritious School Program. Did I get that right? Were those the main parts of your commitments?
Yes, I did notice that, being that it's a like food literacy with education, but then even going to the next level, I will give a shout out that so much more needs to be done to transition students out of high school to considering a career in farming and food production through college, university, and so forth. As our average age of farmers currently in Ontario is 55 years old. There are more farmers that are over the age of 70 than under the age of 35. And so that's another aspect that hopefully we can do a forum as to what colleges and universities and post-secondary, what strategies do we have in place to get the next generation of farmers? That's at a crisis level too, perhaps for another conversation though.
Right, and thank you for adding that, because it's so central to the purposes of public education, citizenship, and employment, right? And you're right, we have focused a lot on the citizenship, the right to a good life and the means to pursue it, and then nutrition adequate enough to be able to pay attention in the classroom or to learn and participate fully in the school experience. But we do need to continue the dialogue on employment and how food literacy will make prestigious working in the agri-food system and something that people want to consider as a career. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for being here. And we'll have to all continue to stay tuned.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is from the Ontario Liberal Party, and Mr. Stephen Del Duca has sent on his behalf Miss Amanda Pulker-Mok. So I hope I've said your last name properly. And we're thrilled that you're here today, Amanda, and thank you very much for coming. And I'm going to turn it over to you to share your perspective from your party.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to share aspects of the Ontario Liberal platform that address healthy food and literacy in Ontario schools. So I am Amanda Pulker-Mok, and I'm the Ontario Liberal candidate in Lanark-Frontenac-Kingston. I am on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I'd like to thank the organizers for hosting this forum today. So just a little bit about me. I am a mom of a 6 and an 8-year-old. I'm an elementary school teacher and a former municipal councillor. I do strongly believe in publicly funded education and that our education system is a great equalizer in our society. However, I know that some of our families are definitely struggling with food security, that the number of those accessing food banks is increasing, and that about 1 in 5 children are currently living in poverty. As a teacher, I see the effects on students who come to school hungry and know that students can't focus and learn if their basic needs aren't met. I also know many schools in the region that I teach in, at least, do have regular access to snack bins, but overall that we really need to be doing more when it comes to student nutrition and learning and education. Our Ontario Liberal plan will ensure that no student goes hungry by providing a free Ontario-grown breakfast to every student, kinder to grade 12, who needs it. And to do this, we will expand the student nutrition program. We also know that nutrition and physical activity do go hand in hand when it comes to healthy living. So our platform does include raising the number of minutes per day of physical activity for our students in the classroom. When looking specifically at the 4 questions that you posed, so the first one, looking at curriculum, food literacy is already a part of it, especially from my experience in elementary school. It falls, it falls under health. But there are definitely lots of opportunities to strengthen the curriculum. And curriculum should be created based on evidence and from input from a variety of stakeholders. The Ontario Liberals are committed to bringing back the education partnership table, which includes stakeholders from key associations and school boards and parent groups and others. This is to ensure that our curriculum is reflective of the latest data and strategies, and that it's robust in keeping up with changing times. And so incorporating food literacy, for example, we want to make sure that we are changing with the times. So with regards to strengthening hands-on food literacy as a teacher, I know that nothing beats being out in the field and working with your hands, and that students learn best when doing. So I have been teaching at schools that do have garden boxes set up. And I think that it's so incredibly important that students have the opportunity to plant food, grow food, and eat that nutritious food. And I would love to see more of this. Many communities in my riding have community gardens, and I know our local food bank also has a fairly large plot of land that they use to grow food. I believe that we need to support more community partnerships like this and help foster them so that we can allow our students to experience, see, touch, feel, taste local food and sort of reap the rewards of their own hard work. personal story. We have farmers that do food boxes. And I have to say, the first time that I ever tasted lettuce that had been picked that day, it was an eye-opening experience to the quality of food that I was getting at a grocery store versus the quality of food from a local farmer. And I think that that's something that we definitely need to have our students experience. The third question, when it comes to tackling rising costs of food, the Ontario Liberals are committed to taking on mega grocery retailers and will legislate fair and open negotiations between retailers and suppliers, farmers. This will not only help our smaller local farmers, but by focusing on local, we know that, the less time that it takes to get food from the farm to the grocery store, the more nutritious that food is. We know that the less distance that food has to travel, that it's better for the environment. And we know that overall a focus on local will help support our communities and help keep food prices down. Lastly, we as Ontario Liberals are committed to working with the federal government with regards to establishing a national universal school food program. We know that some communities are disproportionately affected by poverty, and I believe that a universal program is key to ensuring equitable access and ending food insecurity. So, not sure where I am with time, but overall, we need to be investing in our publicly funded education system and ensuring that we are setting students and youth up to reach their full potential. In order to do that, the Ontario Liberals are committed to capping class sizes to 20, hiring more teachers, special education workers, mental health workers. We will bring back the education partnership table that Ford scrapped and expand the student nutrition program so that all students K to 12 have access to an Ontario grown breakfast and aren't hungry. We do need to keep building, though, on the great work that organizations like those hosting today are doing. And I know that the Ontario Liberals very much so look forward to continuing this conversation. Thanks. Oh, you're on mute, Peggy.
Thank you very, very much, Amanda, as a mom and an Ontario teacher and a candidate. And one of the themes that I heard in what you were talking about is the emphasis on partnerships. So whether that's whatever the next iteration of Bill 216 is, you had mentioned the education partnership table. That would be a participative process. There would be a lot of people at the table and it would be evidence-based. So a commitment to the Ontario curriculum, including food literacy, but done in a way that partners are involved. The system support is also very partnership based, looking to local communities, so central control in the province, but local partnerships with fairgrounds or farmers or facilities that are already in existence, and that makes that accessible. And then certainly with the expansion for the Ontario Student Nutrition Program, the free breakfast for those that need it, but also a further expansion of that. And you didn't mention public purchasing, and I don't know if that was part of what you were intending around local groups purchasing from local farmers. And so I'd like you to clarify that point in terms of the partnerships piece on the local food to support not just the environmental impact of not transporting very far, but also supporting local economies. And then your last part, certainly working to achieve greater social justice, not only in Ontario, but nationally for students who are disproportionately affected by not having enough food to do the work of learning and growing into the citizen and their full life's potential. So did I catch the main points, and would you like to clarify anything I just mentioned?
Right. And so, yes, I do believe that you captured it. And I just know that when we support local, our neighbors, our communities definitely benefit. And that by, giving power back to some of our farmers to negotiate with local grocery stores and sort of taking some of some of the I don't want to say power again, but like some of the big grocery stores are the ones that sort of hold all of the pieces. And so we want to see that our local communities are really have the tools that they need to really succeed. And I believe that if we've learned anything from the pandemic, especially around supply chain, like we rely on our farmers, on our neighbors. And I think we really need to shift our priorities back to supporting our local communities and seeing how we can build on those relationships, especially when it comes to education. And I feel very fortunate to live and work in a predominantly rural community where many of my students do live on farms and know where their food comes from. But I live in Carleton Place, a small urban center, and don't have the land to grow very much. And so I support, well, I mentioned the food share box that I get from a local farmer, seeing more of those partnerships from an education perspective, I think is really a step in the right direction to support our students, to support our teachers, to support our communities.
Wonderful. So lots of partnerships and lots of local emphasis. Thank you very, very much for being here today, Amanda, and for helping us all find the way forward together. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to move now to the Ontario New Democratic Party and Ms. Andrea Horwath, who has invited on her behalf Mr. Terence Kernaghan from London North Centre. Hi, Terence. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to jump right in and hand it over to you.
Sounds great, and thank you everyone for having me. I'm Terence Kernaghan, the Ontario NDP candidate for London North Centre. And I can't tell you how important this discussion is because, as a former educator, I saw firsthand what happens, when kids are not given the supports that they need. I entered politics because kids with mental health needs and special needs were being placed in classrooms without supports. To my mind, that is not inclusion, that itself is abandonment. But to our topic at hand, I myself ran breakfast programs at the school I was at, and it is a wonderful thing to make sure that there are also community supports, to make sure that we can expand these programs and teach children all about food literacy. I think it's a shame that Bill 216 was not passed through the legislature and ended up dying at the standing committee. I believe that we need to make sure that we have these tools for kids to make sure that they understand exactly, what is going into their bodies, what they're taking from the earth, and how we can, feed one another. It's often said that water is life, but I would also say that food is love. Our curriculum also needs to be updated. There needs to be a greater focus on experiential learning. It's the type of learning where kids, really, get their chance to get their hands dirty, as it were, and it makes sure that it's something that is relevant to them. I also think as well of the dish with one spoon teachings, and how if we know that enough is enough, we will always have enough, and we ought to share with one another and make sure that no one is going hungry, that we are making sure that all folks within our communities have the right assistance. I also think about a student of mine, a former student, we'll call him Justin, just for the purposes of this event. And we knew that there was a lunchbox thief in a classroom that I worked in. And it took the adults in the room a while to find it out, the educational assistants and myself. And then when we found out, we asked Justin why this was the case, and it turns out he was not bringing any food whatsoever to school. He actually had brought the one day an uncooked egg. And so we, of course, as adults made sure to provide for him, but it's such a shame that any child would be placed within that position to not have the right resources. So I've also been pleased to work with wonderful folks in London here. We have the Grove at Western Fair, which is doing phenomenal things. And in particular, I think of Andrew at Growing Chefs, which is doing wonderful programming. And they've also taken a look at how we can update the curriculum, whether it's overall learning outcomes, the specific expectations, the overall expectations in the curriculum. We need to think about how food literacy is embedded in all different streams across the curriculum, whether it's language, math, science, but also art and phys ed, where students are learning about this as a discipline and as something that's, touches all different aspects of learning. With the Ontario NDP, we also want to make sure that we are protecting our environment by expanding the Greenbelt, making sure that there's greater access for folks with a transportation network where folks are able to get out to the rural areas. One of the greatest economic drivers here in the London area is our agri-foods business. We want to also curb urban sprawl, because we know as soon as we lose that farmland, that it's much more difficult to get it back. We must also commit to stopping the reckless and unnecessary Highway 413 and the Bradford bypass. I know that developers will say that they can recreate a wetland, but we know that it is impossible to do so with the biodiversity and the amount of strength that it has as an ecosystem. And wetlands are absolutely necessary as basically the kidneys of our Great Lakes when we see algae blooms and we see all different manner of ecological changes. But also, our commitment is to plant 1 billion trees by 2030 and make sure that we have a water strategy. I think we also need to make sure that we are working with our partners, working with the federal government to make sure that there's a healthy school food program. As I said, the great folks at Growing Chefs have really pioneered some phenomenal work, how they can provide at cost school lunches for a fraction of the price of pizza days or taco days or burger days. And this is something also that motivates children. They become involved in the process. They're involved in the process of growing the food. And that really is something that is necessary, because we don't just want to consume, we also want to think about how we're creating a future of children that understand how food is created, how it is made, how it might be processed, but also ultimately how it contributes to our overall well-being. And, I think as well, we need to make sure that there are investments in the Ontario Student Nutrition Program. A child cannot learn unless their needs are being met nutritionally. We see so many kids who, unfortunately have the sugar highs and then the following dips in energy, the lethargy, the lack of concentration. And if we address these and we make sure all students are getting what they need, then they're able to thrive. I also, want to make sure that we're, making sure that there are investments in education, because prior governments have looked at education as a cost. And from my viewpoint, it is an investment. It is an investment in our future. So we need to make sure that these sorts of programs are shored up. Unfortunately, we have seen some budgetary cuts from the Ford government. I believe that those need to be replaced with investments. I also think about mental health. There are so many different things where students as active participants in their learning and participating in the environment contributes to their overall well-being and their mental health as well. When we look at our tree canopy cover as well, if we look at our environment, that has so much of, an impact on a student's outlook, being able to be in nature, to participate in nature. In London here, we are not set to have the 40% tree canopy cover as recommended until around 2065, whereas Toronto is going to achieve that goal by 2050. So we need to make sure that we're equal partners, not only sustaining the environment, but showing children how to participate within the environment and making sure we have an updated curriculum. I can't speak highly enough about how the wonderful work of Growing Chefs. I've seen some of their programming in place, big spoons and little spoons. And, I think as well, these are great programs. We also want to bring experts from the community. I think it's wonderful to see, all of these people doing wonderful things in the community, but we also want to make sure that we're reaching out to the community, making sure the community is involved. And as well, I love the fact that within our Green New Democratic Deal, we have a commitment to a youth climate corps. So making sure that students are as well active participants within their creation of the future. Just making sure I'm not running out of time here. I'm so used to being in Queen's Park and having a clock on the wall. So I don't, there's nothing we want. There's nothing worse than a politician going over time.
We'll let you know.
Oh, awesome. I think as well, we see that there are around 175 acres of farmland that are being lost per day across Canada. And that's something that we need to make sure. We have to make sure that farmers are also being equal partners, where there's an agriculture impact assessment, and also making sure that rural families, are connected. I think as well with the NDP, we're looking at how all of these systems have become disconnected. We see so many things, and unfortunately, this is a terrible pun, but becoming silos. And we need to make sure that all partners are at the table working together with one another to build the best Ontario that is possible. So I'll look forward to any questions from you.
Thank you very much, Terence. I really loved that water is life and food is love. It puts the whole dialogue at the humanities, which is really what this is all about. We need to figure out the economics and the logistics and find the funding and whatnot, but that's a great positioning of this. And so I definitely want to offer your opportunity to correct me that the high points of what you said, although there was a lot that was great, is that you are committed to whatever the next version of Bill 216 is. And that one of the things that are critical to the NDP party is the student's voice there. You shared what Justin's experience is. We're often looking at data and whatnot, but the voice of the Ontario students somehow in that dialogue is important. For the hands-on infrastructure, you're thinking a little bit more holistically with protecting the farmland and planting the trees and protecting the green belt. So making sure the biodiversity and the conditions in which we can grow great food are there. For the federal government, certainly a commitment to working with the $1 billion over the 5 years. Did I get that right?
I would say so. I think it's important that, we are looking inwards, taking a look at the curriculum, how we can update it, how we can make it modernized, across all different disciplines, but also involving experts, because we have so many wonderful people working within the community. And, as a former educator who would often, do I guess this is, I'm dating myself, but you'd have a webcam chat with, different museums around the world who would have their experts. We can also do that with so many different people who are working within, food production, agriculture, and sustainability.
Excellent ideas. And thank you for that. And the other aspect that you did add is that local ingenuity. And you mentioned many times growing chefs that are a model to, in many ways, across many perspectives. I wanted to just double check or provide another opportunity for comments on the Ontario Student Nutrition Program and what the NDP party's commitments would be on that.
Well, we absolutely need to make sure that there is appropriate funding in the Ontario Student Nutrition Program. As I said, I believe strongly that education is an investment and it's not a cost. This is the type of thing where we need to make sure that students are getting what they need and when they need it. Too often, there are children who are going without breakfast. Their, parents have busy lives. Maybe they're not able to provide it, and they might, send their child and just say, oh, go pick up something yourself. And they might not choose the most healthy thing, or there might not be something there to choose. And this way it is, it's a barrier-free zone where we can make sure that students are getting what they need when they need it. Because I just can't think about the isolation and also the pain that students feel when they're going to school hungry and then expected to sit still, pay attention, do their very best when they don't have the energy to do it.
Yeah, and one of your opening comments is about equalizing and social justice and providing the life chances for all Ontario students. So thank you very, very much for that, Terence, and for being here today. So for the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, we urge everyone to connect in with their local candidates and to find out locally what the commitments are to healthy school food and to food literacy in the future of the Ontario curriculum. And we want to thank Mr. Daryl Cramp from Prince Edward Hastings, who tirelessly worked in getting the changes into the Ontario curriculum, but also putting forward the Bill 216 in private members bill in October 2020. So we want to give a big shout out to Daryl and thank him very much for all that he did, and emphasize that people should connect with their local parties for the Progressive Conservatives. So that's it for our speakers' formal process. I wanted to just invite the speakers. Was there anything further, Amanda, Mike, or Terence, that you would like to say or add?
You know, I just very much appreciate your focus on this. I want to thank you all for hosting this important discussion and continuing to push the narrative forward to make sure that we're focusing on not only sustainability, but students and how we can build the best and brightest future. You know, it's why I entered politics. So whenever anyone asks me if I can speak up about education or making sure that students get what they need, I will always jump at the chance. So thank you all for having me, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Terence. Mike?
All good, Matt. But
wow, my gosh, it's
all
Schreiner, Matt. I'm so sorry. See, my hunger's
no.
kicking in. I usually eat at noon. I apologize. I don't know if I let myself off the hook with that. I sincerely apologize.
No worries,
Matt,
no worries.
and I got
It's
your
all
last
good.
name wrong too. So this is
fair enough.
So
I take a lot worse as a teacher. So I just put in the chat box to let everyone know, and Terence and Amanda, hopefully I'll have the opportunity to meet you down at Queen's Park following June 2nd. But based on Daryl's great work and initiative to Bill 216, that, you know, my commitment to the people of Parry Sound-Muskoka is to always work across party lines. And this is one of many issues that really needs that commitment and that pledge that we will actually do that and really move forward on bringing these initiatives to light, and recognizing at the same time that unfortunately there remains to be a $16 billion plus backlog in infrastructure deficits across our schools in Ontario. And hopefully, you know, we can integrate some of these solutions from Sustain Ontario and what we've been talking about today into some of those improvements when the money comes available to do those infrastructure retrofits and upgrades, so forth. But again, thank you so much. And my pledge is to work across party lines with every issue, but especially this one too. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Matt. And we do need to find the way forward together. It's an election, and that's really important. It's part of why we had today, but the way forward together is a great message. Thank you very much. Amanda?
And yeah, I want to echo what Matt just said about how, you know, there are certain issues that are nonpartisan. And when you're talking about food insecurity, that's a nonpartisan issue. And I know that personally, and on behalf of the Ontario Liberals, you know, working across party lines is imperative if we're going to come up with the best sustainable solutions to these really complex to these complex problems that our communities are facing. And so I always believe, you know, it starts with a conversation. And so thank you for hosting this this conversation today, and for the opportunity to share our ideas, and look forward to more conversations in the future. And that's how we're going to build, you know, a sustainable, equitable education system and Ontario overall. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Yes, a sustainable, equitable education system for a sustainable, equitable future, which is I'm thinking of Victor Hugo back when I was studying French, and you can resist many things, but you cannot resist an idea whose time has come. So let's hope this is the idea whose time has come. So thank you very, very much, Terence and Amanda and Matt, for being here today. And please thank Mike and Stephen and Andrea for us as well. I do see I have a message in the chat that I do want to address. We invited all parties here today, and we weren't able to coordinate something with the Progressive Conservatives. However, we definitely encourage everyone to connect in with their local candidates. And we do also want to emphasize Daryl Cramp from Prince Edward Hastings and the commitments that he has really brought a lot forward to help move things in the direction that we all want it to go. So I think I'm at time now, and thank you all so very much for being here with us today. And thank you, Carolyn, for having me moderate this incredible event with Sustain Ontario and the Coalition for Healthy School Food.
Thanks, Peggy. So I see a lot of comments in the Facebook chat. Thanks for all the discussion. We see some comments about, thank you to presenters who have spoken about careers in agriculture. People are excited about the points about multi-level and cross-party government action, about getting the next generation involved. And it's great to hear about all the successful programs in your communities. Actually, one comment was, it's great to hear from candidates located in different ridings across the province who are advocating, great to hear all of you advocate for the work we're all passionate about and to share their own stories of what's happening in their own local food, farming, cooking, and education scene. And yeah, we just really appreciate the words about working across party lines and in collaboration. In terms of just closing remarks, thank you so much, for sharing how you'd continue to build momentum for food literacy and school food programs here in Ontario. I'd like to put out a huge thanks. Thank you so much, Peggy, for everything you've done to bring together and host this conversation. To Alicia for timekeeping and for all your work to support food literacy and school food programs in the province. And to everyone else, many of you on the line who have been tirelessly working to make sure that children and youth can access healthy food and receive greater food literacy education. So as next steps, we just ask that you keep connecting with your candidates to ask what they'll do to support school food and food literacy in our schools. And you can access more questions and election materials relating to good food and farming at sustainontario.com/vote-on-food. And you'll find that link in the Facebook event page, the live stream page where you're watching. So with that, just a big thank you to everyone, and let's keep the momentum going together. Take care and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.